Hello, everybody. Some of you I may know and some of you may not, but good evening and thank you for finding the time to come along and listen to this presentation. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to walk you through obviously what we've been doing for Dragonfly Ireland, but I think it's important that we start off at the beginning in a sense and let you know how we've got to where we are and what we've been doing with the Dragonflies, as I say. So my name's Damian McFerran. I actually manage CEDAR, the Record Centre at the Ulster Museum, or the National Museums of Northern Ireland as it is now. And I'm Dragonfly Recorder for Ireland. This is a joint project, which I'll go on to talk about in a bit more detail with our colleagues in Waterford, the National Biodiversity Data Centre. And the point of contact there is Dave Wall, the Citizen Science Officer. So CEDAR, as I say, CEDAR is the Centre for Environmental Data and Recording. It's a local environmental record centre for Northern Ireland, and we're based within the curatorial department of the National Museums NI. And currently we are out at Cultraw, and CEDAR has been operational since 1995. And it's a partnership between our colleagues, curatorial staff at the museum, the Northern Ireland Environment Agency, now part of DAERA as a standalone agency, and the recording community of Northern Ireland. We're actually funded by the Northern Ireland Environment Agency and have been since the setting up of the Record Centre. So we've come through a lot of iterations, a lot of business cases, a lot of business plans, and that's taken us pretty much up to year 28. So we now have a new 10-year business plan, which open will take us up to 2033, which is very exciting for all because it allows us now to do a bit more planning and think about things strategically, which is always very important. So our aim, as it is there, is built around a series of key objectives, basically getting more data in, making sure more data goes out, passing on skills, training, mentoring, etc., and then developing this whole theme of citizen science as it currently exists. And you see there, which is quite an important one, and this is where the Dragonfly project fits in. It's the delivery of agreed projects. Obviously, the Dragonfly Ireland project has been agreed with the department. It's also been agreed with the department over the border in Dublin and through that Waterford. And that really is why we've got the green light to go ahead with it. So I think it's worth having a wee look at how the centre is actually structured now. Through this new business plan, we've taken on 4 staff recently, which is a major step forward. So we've now got a terrestrial and freshwater database manager, and we've got 2 posts, a data support officer and a validation officer. And also we have a learning and engagement officer as well. And those are the 4 new people that have just really started with us within the last month. We also have a couple of additional posts which we're hoping to place over the coming months. That's the marine support officer. We also have our marine data manager currently. And then as well, we're going to get some help for species surveillance officer. So those posts hopefully will be filled within the next 6 months or so. So obviously more people equates to more getting done. So, I mean, it's important when you think about it that actually most of the records that we hold and most of the people that contribute records to ourselves are what's listed called volunteers. Actually, they're not really volunteers, they're professional volunteers. You know, these are the local experts, be they butterfly conservation, Ulster Wildlife. And over the last 30 years, let's say, we've built up a very good relationship with that external group. We've had this overarching body called the Environmental Recorders Group, through which we have a grant system where we can give them money for particular projects, up to £1,000 over the course of the year. So that's like the band of people that assist CEDAR, and the core reason why we're actually still at the museum. That's their needs, you know, and demands and expectations that we're trying to meet and assist them with their wider projects. Everything obviously that we do is a partnership. It has to be. We don't do anything on our own. It's very easy to go running your own rails and go down rabbit holes, as they talk about now, which is not a good idea at all. And it's something we stay away from. We're very keen on partnerships. We partner with local, national, and indeed international organisations and assist their projects. And sometimes we're in charge of them, and sometimes we're just assisting with them, and other times we're just aware of them. So, I mean, partnerships are key. The extent to that partnership approach is just there in front of you. I mean, that's a snapshot from a couple of years ago. Individuals, organisations, government, non-government bodies that we either work with, have worked with, and assist projects with. So I mean, it's really quite comprehensive and gives you a feel for the number of people that we actually see there actually works with on a day-by-day basis. Some of the things you might not be aware that we do is we do answer back calls with a back inquiry line, and obviously we take the information through that, put it onto the database. You have a network of regional coordinators, if you like, that we are in daily contact with, particularly over the summer. And through that, then we can delegate out bat calls. That means if somebody has a problem with a bat or they have bats in their house, whatever, we can pass them on to the appropriate individual. In terms of the top two images, it's just what I was saying about the information request. We do an information request system. It's not, it is, well, it can potentially generate income from commercial inquiries, and any of that income is used to fund the Environmental Recorders Group Fund, and that's fed back into the local recording community. So it's not used to pay our salaries or keep the lights on. We do a lot of marine work, and it's just a few slides there of the type of work we do. Those are people looking for invasives. We're doing wrong training courses. We help the department top left there with some of their work, and then we have a few divers at the museum, so they're constantly helping us with inquiries and passing on information and whatnot. That was a training course we were assisting with a few years ago in terms of beaching of cetaceans, and it's important for our staff to be trained up and be aware of current techniques and protocols, particularly when you see something like this washed up on the beach, where we've now taken that and buried it, and the museum in a few years' time will be able to dig it back up and hopefully have it part of the collection, if not in the Ulster Museum. So, I mean, over the last 30 years, we've obviously done a lot of work. We've done a lot of different things. We came through a period of doing a lot of books, be the formal publications like Natural History of Ulster, you may be aware of that, but there were other important ones, conference proceedings like the Marine Biodiversity event, and then obviously All Ireland projects like the lichens and the dragonflies, and formal book launches, and really a lot of it is a social element to it as well, and getting people together, getting them talking about their work, areas of shared interest, and that's usually built around a theme like a book launch, for example. So I mean, those are all important things that have come through, lessons learned, and all the rest of those things. I mean, when you're doing some of these surveys, I'm just trying to give you a feel here for how we've approached the dragonfly. This is a micromoth survey that we did years ago. And I mean, it's not just a matter of asking people to jump in a car and hope for the best. I mean, there are key sections that we're able to divide the map up into particular species or particular habitat, and then we would send particular individuals or members of the public might be interested to know more. So, I mean, we do approach these projects in a very strategic way as well. And yes, a lot of information does come through the public, citizen scientists, but we do encourage the likes of more recognised field workers, let's say, to get involved too. This is a lichen project we managed, so we scaled up from a Northern Ireland approach to an All Ireland approach, which then went to a Britain and Ireland approach. So, I mean, there's a data set that went from 5,000 records to now 200,000 for the island of Ireland, and that's a project that we've managed and coordinated our response to via the British Lichen Society. We do a lot of websites as well. This is the format of one of the new ones that we're going to be launching. It's a current site, yes, but we're updating it, and you can see how we've got the Ireland map, we've got the Britain Ireland map, and we're obviously then trying to stimulate a bit more interest by having a key there as well. In terms of getting that information out, there's a variety of formats, as there always is currently, but probably the main one going forward with ourselves would be the NBN Atlas for Northern Ireland, and that's working with our National Biodiversity Network partners. We have our own atlas for the North at the minute, and I mean, this is 2019 we're talking about, and there are already 1 million records on it. So, I mean, now that we've got more staff, more records coming in, more records being validated and verified. There'll be more records sent up to the Atlas. Really, the nice thing about these schemes is that we can place the Northern Ireland information into the context of all Ireland, but we can also place it into the context of Britain and Ireland. And indeed, in some projects, we even go over into continental Europe. So, I mean, what we're trying to do is think of the bigger picture. There's always another level for these projects. So a lot of the information that we have collated for the Dragonfly project now goes into this GBIF, the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, as well. So I mean, there's always another level, and I think we're always conscious of that when we're doing these projects. So dragonflies, the reason why we're here tonight. Right, my first involvement with dragonflies goes back to probably the late 90s when I came in working with Cedar. There had been a few projects on dragonflies before, nothing terribly formal. It was more of a contribution to a Britain and Ireland atlas, let's say. So we got some money from our colleagues in National Parks and Wildlife Service in Dublin, and we set up this thing called Dragonfly Ireland. We realized very quickly that feedback is critical for all these projects. So on the left hand side there, that was a poster that we sent out to everybody that could send in even one record. So they had that as a keepsake. In the middle, we then did a guide. There hadn't been a previous guide, and that was a series of cards within a plastic wallet, which proved incredibly popular. And it was that popular that people are still asking for it. Unfortunately, there's none left. And on the right is the end product, the book, which is a summary of all our information. So that was a 4-year recording project, again over the island of Ireland, and it's very successful. And it was a building block for a lot of these other projects that were to follow. So I mean, what do you do when you're in between projects? I mean, it's very hard to keep interest going on any group when there isn't a project. I always say to people, the best way of getting results for a project is to have, the best way of getting records in is to have a project. And you can see there that there was a very low level of records, let's say up till the spike, the blue line on the left-hand side, that was Dragonfly Ireland. And then after that project was over, it tailed off again, which is inevitable. So there was a sort of background level, very low level actually, of recording going on in dragonflies up until the most recent program in 2019. On the right hand side, as we were getting closer to Dragonfly Ireland 2, I'm going to call it, and launching the scheme, we thought, wouldn't it be nice to start sort of getting people thinking, let's say, about dragonflies? So myself and a friend, Robert Thompson, who was main author and major photographer in all these schemes, decided to put together these cards. And they were very simple cards, just a distribution map and a bit of information and a nice photograph, just to let people know that, hey ho, there's dragonflies out there. And you can see that, I mean, you just couldn't do it any other way. I mean, for somebody that grew up back in the 1970s, that then got a job in the 1980s and 90s, to reach 2,500 people, was nearly impossible unless you were writing down 2,500 letters and posting them out or making 2,500 phone calls. So, I mean, the social media element of the whole thing has been a game changer for these projects, particularly when you want to come and get your message out. So, I mean, that thing on the right-hand side was just, I think we did several of those and they proved quite popular. And it was just an awareness building exercise in the background before the actual scheme was launched. Okay, so what is Dragonfly Ireland? Well, it's an all Ireland. Well, it isn't. It isn't. Basically, it is an all Ireland citizen science survey of dragonflies and their habitats. And there's two partners here. There's ourselves in the north, and there's Waterford in the Republic. In the Republic, the project is funded by the EPA, and they're wanting to investigate other things around the theme of dragonflies, bioindicators, climate change, water quality, and stuff like that. As I say, in the north, it's funded by the Northern Ireland Environment Agency. And really what we're trying to do at a very, very broad level is take a volunteer base, train them, send them out, and then as they see things, help them with their identifications and trying to encourage them to keep contributing, just not even just really dragonflies, but contribution sightings of particular any species to the two record centres, I suppose, is probably the best way of describing it. But as well as that, and it's a theme that works its way through all these projects that we've been involved with. It's sometimes you have to engage people as paid field workers, and we do, and we have done that, and we'll continue to do so. And they go out and look at particular sites and particular species, and send in detailed resources, detailed reports, which are then individually made available to the department. So, I mean, there's a two-tier approach, but basically, yes, it is a citizen science project. So, I mean, I want to start at the end in a sense before we go much further into the talk. We have currently nearly 66,500 species occurrence records or species records for dragonflies. Dragonflies collectively, dragonflies and damselflies collectively are known as the Odonata, and just under 23,500 of those 66 odd thousand records have been completed during the current project, which is unbelievable. In fact, in the previous project, with just under 14,000 records over a 4-year study. So in the same 4 years, if you like, we're already nearly up, well, we're just over 23,000. Quite a lot of species. We haven't found any new species to Ireland in the current scheme, although we did find a couple in the previous scheme. I think the recorder number is needing a bit of revision. I'd say it's closer to 600 people have sent in sightings. Now, it could be one record, or it could be several, or it could be tens. It just varies. So if you think of Ireland having 1,010 kilometre squares, we have recorded from 86% of those up to between 2019 and 2023. So, I mean, it would be nice in the final year of the survey, 2024, that we could get that up closer to 100%, which is never easy. We have and still will be doing training courses. So, I mean, those are usually limited to around 13 people. We go to various sites throughout the island. And again, off the back of that comes a bit of mentoring and a bit of support and all the rest of those things. Like all these projects, I say, there's always something happens that nobody's ever thought about at the start of them. And particularly one thing that's happened in this project is that we've been fortunate to get money through NERC to do a PhD that's looking at the population genetics of the Irish damselfly. I'll go on to talk a bit more about that, but that takes us into the realms of research and genetics and eDNA and all those topical things that people want to speak about now. But as well as that, I mean, it's the why and the what factor is what I call it. We all know what we're doing. We're recording dragonflies, but the why element here is simply we're fitting into policy and decision making at at a variety of levels, be it the Northern Ireland priority species or, state of dragonflies or whatever. I mean, those are important reasons for doing it. So all those single records feed into that decision and policy making element of projects and the department's thinking on legislation, etc. So why citizen science? I mean, it's very nice to do citizen science projects because I often said it's not getting people interested that's the problem. It's maintaining and developing that interest. So in terms of maintaining and developing interest in dragonflies, let's have a dragonfly project. So obviously people are all spread throughout the island of Ireland. Generally, there's a lot of interest. We all see these things. We sometimes wonder what they are, and we send in our records. And that's been going on since the early 1800s for dragonflies. So people have always been interested in dragonflies. They're big, they're colorful, they make a lot of noise. You can see them. You don't have to get your way too much to see them. If you're near water, that's probably the only real thing that you need to get dragonflies to come is, and they need water. So, and I mean, this whole idea built around community, and there's a lot of community groups now that have this as an element of the recording activities where they're actually going out and actively searching for these things. So, I mean, there's one example of a species, common darter, very common species, widespread throughout the island of Ireland. So, I mean, we get a lot of records in. Obviously, it's a common species. Again, I mean, if we don't have that level of interest from the public, it's very, very difficult to get the number of records in. And I mean, it's not a numbers game necessarily, but it is at the same time, isn't it, really? So, I mean, you've got a very low level up until you start the first Dragonfly Ireland project, and then bang, hundreds of people want to send in their records, and they have done so. And we're finding the same thing now with Dragonfly Ireland too. And between those two, yes, there was a bit of a lag, but it's inevitable. And people will say, it's a very cost-effective way of getting records, and it is probably. But at the same time, it's not free because you have to jump into your car, you have to drive here or drive there, et cetera, et cetera. It's your time and all those things. So, I mean, we're very appreciative of the people that have been contributing records at their own cost to this project, and we're well aware of that. As I say, don't you just love social media? I don't really know a lot about it, I'll be honest, but I mean, we do use it a lot, or somebody uses it a lot, and this project is not me. I do the odd sort of post on Facebook and stuff, but I mean, you can very quickly get a lot of engagement. The awareness levels upped significantly, and if you're running events, you can do all those things. I mean, I come from an era where I talked to people or lifted the phone and rang people, or even, goodness me, I wrote letters and stuff. But I mean, that's no way to communicate in today's age. And I mean, social media is where it's at. And I mean, these sort of very interim figures do tell that story. So we do use it and are well aware of its importance. So if we look at the records that have been submitted since 2019, I mean, there's been a steady-ish sort of rise in the number of records. We're up in the last year to 4,500 or just over it. So, I mean, there's obviously a lot of demand. People are seeing these things spread over the country. So, I mean, it's all very positive. I mean, there's 13 point whatever percent increase in the last year. So, I mean, hopefully now in the last year, we'll get that figure to reach the magical 5,000 level, and that would be a significant step forward again. So, I mean, records are coming through, and we're very pleased with the numbers that we're receiving, and indeed the quality of them as well. Because, I mean, you can search all your life for something that's incredibly rare, and somebody will go out and find it by accident. And we've had a few examples of that over the course of the project. And I mean, those are important records. And it's off the back of those records of those species that we've actually parachuted people in to look for them in a bit more detail. So that's important. So if you're out and about and you see any of these things, make sure you send in your records. And indeed, if you photograph, all the better. So, I mean, there's a lot of work goes on below the surface here. I'm not going to deny it, but I mean, that's part of the challenge of running a record center. It's equatable to all the groups. The records have to be validated and verified. The verification element relates to the species. The validation element relates to the grid reference and the location, although they're interchangeable terms. But I mean, the number of records that actually have failed in the last year is quite low. I mean, so, I mean, it suggests to me we're doing a super job, and I would say that, wouldn't it? And we've went back to people that we're not sure about in terms of the species of the record. Ideally, if we had a photograph, then that does help the process. But I mean, to say 94% of your records of that nearly 5,000 total are correct is fantastic, and that's a credit to yourselves if you're sending in records, and indeed to everybody that's sending in records. Yes, there is a process, and I'm not going to go through this in great detail, but I mean, I just want you to be aware of the fact that just because we get something in, we don't necessarily just accept it at face value. I'll describe it like this. When you submit a record in one of these online systems, it's not a record. It's a thing called a sighting. And it doesn't become a record until it's verified and then validated and then goes on to the database. So between you seeing something, taking a photograph and sending it into whatever system to it making its way onto the actual database and becoming a record, there are various levels of validation going on, and a constant, in some occasions, particularly for the important records. I'm saying important, I really mean the rare species. There's a constant flow of communication between who saw it and the verifier, the validator. So there is a process there, and we do follow it quite rigorously. So what does it all mean? Well, I mean, there's two centres in Ireland, as we're all aware. There's one in Waterford, Cousin National Biodiversity Data Centre, and there's one in Belfast. We do talk to each other. We work with each other. We have a very close relationship with each other. We have a very positive relationship with each other. And what we say collectively is, whatever system you want to use for recording your records, you use it. You know, if you're sitting in the north of Ireland or Northern Ireland and you see something, but you want to use the Waterford system, you use it. And likewise for anybody that's in Cork. So, I mean, the bottom line is we share our records between us and we coordinate. We're working on other projects. And what's actually developed out of these partnerships and coordination projects is a top level data set. And I mean, we share everything. So on the left, you see what records coming into the Waterford Centre, including ones in the north, which is fine. And then on the right, obviously, they're the ones that are coming in through our system. There's a few records, not the same level. So what we do then is we mesh those together and you come up with something like this. So, I mean, what we do is we share our records. I share with Dave, and Dave says with me. We check each other's records. It's fine. It's always good to get another pair of eyes looking over these things, and then through that we can look at where the red spots, you know, where a lot of the recording goes on. But then there are other sites where there's zero or fewer records being returned. So what we like to do then is we take that information and we do something like this, where we can do a gap analysis, where we can see quite clearly there are 10 kilometre squares where we have no records, and we would say to people at the start of the year, these are the gap squares, and we'd like someone to go out and just spot a dragonfly recording. But then if you see anything else, don't worry about it, send it in too. The next thing about dragonflies is there tends to be two seasons to them. There's the earlier species you get up to the start of July, anytime from April to the end of June. And then you get another set of species, give or take, there's a bit of overlap between July and September, October. Again, the end of the season is dictated by the weather. So, I mean, if you see any of those squares sitting there tonight and you think, oh, right, I'll jump in the car come the 1st of April and see what I can see, fire ahead. Or if you want a bit more detail, let me know, we can get it to you. Oh, dear me. So what you're looking at here is really the detail. I mean, what we use for recording our information is a thing called Recorder 6. I'm not going to bore you with the database and how it works, but how it actually functions in a sense is that we take everything and we break it down into its constituent parts, and we assign it into particular surveys, and we add locations, and we make sure the species are right. And then this bobbing screen is how we actually import it. So we make an Excel file from somebody, and we break it down into important components. When I'm doing this sort of thing, I like to hold on to the maximum amount of information. And I'm not going to try and add everything, but if I think it's relevant, because I mean, it's a very easy thing to say, but I mean, a lot of what we're actually doing is not about today. It's about maybe 25 years from now. And if somebody says, you know, what did that McFerran boy know about dragonflies? Because look at this data set. Well, I mean, you can follow the process. You can follow the species records, you can follow the location details, and then all that's crammed into this thing called Recorder 6. And you can see at the minute there, we're sitting at just over 2.8 million records, and that's for a variety of groups. So, I mean, all those, I mean, this is the thing you got to remember, all 2.8 million of those records have been checked, not by me personally, but by the local experts as well, by the plants, lichens, bryophytes, whatever. So that's fed into that centralized database. And I mean, one of the things we're doing now is we're going through it now that we've got our additional staff, and we're checking everything. Well, not everything, but we're checking things at random. Let's say we're starting off with particular groups or particular projects, and we're just running those things through Checker and looking to see what's been added, what's been missed, what we can edit or change to give it more value. So, I mean, that is a very quick summary of database and how we're approaching the records. But I mean, that is where the time is spent, because everyone has to be checked. Because when I took over this process, I checked all 15,000 records from the previous recording schemes just to make sure they were right. And as you're probably aware of, I've missed a few. So I mean, but and then I've got somebody checking those again today, and they've picked out 100 out of 66,000 that we need checked, which is quite a low number, I'm glad to say. So this is our online system for anybody that is using it or wants to start using it. There's a thing called iRecord. Now, you probably don't see this when you're using it. What you may be using is a thing called Cedar Online Recording, if you use that system for the north of Ireland. And it basically Cedar Online Recording is part of the iRecord family. So when you send a record through Cedar Online Recording, I get an email to say somebody sent in a record. I go in, check it by looking at the line. If they've got a photograph, I can double click on it and it'll expand so that I can check it is what you're saying it is. And then once I know it's correct, I can go to the right hand side there and hit the single green arrow or double green arrow. I don't really see there's much difference. It just means it's correct. So every record comes in, and every sighting comes in, and once I validate it, well, at this stage I only verify it. I only check the species. I don't do the validation until it's been brought into the Recorder 6, because it allows me to check against sites and grid references and stuff. So there's a two-tier approach there for us, and that's not even the approach I was talking to you about earlier on there with the verification of the species name. So I mean, it's you probably aren't aware of the background to this. So a sighting submission, email to myself, checking. Once I green light it, so to speak. Actually, once I green light it, it then goes up to the NBN, because it takes the NBN Atlas, National Biodiversity Atlas for Northern Ireland, will take verified records out of iRecord. We do also get submissions through the iNaturalist program, which comes into iRecord as a data export. So any Dragonfly records, again, I become aware of them. They're submitted through iNaturalist as well. So, I mean, in terms of Dragonfly Ireland, there's different levels, obviously, in recording. There's the person out go for a walk, saw something, blah, blah, took quick photograph, sent it in, spotter. The next is the recorder, which is out and about, a bit more sort of rigorous in terms of actively recording, not just the one single sighting. And then you've got the other level, which is really to do with the monitoring, where you're actually encouraged to go to different sites, different times of the year. I mean, it's really a bit more formal in that sense, and that allows you to set up like a monitoring station for the dragonflies for your particular area. So, I mean, we're not telling people what to do. We're encouraging them to get involved, be it the spotter, or you want to become an active recorder, or actually do you want to set up your own monitoring site? So those are the things we can do there for you as well. As well as that, I mean, this is what I was saying earlier on. This is the mapping of turloughs in the Republic of Ireland, and we're looking at those as a habitat type. And then within that, we're looking at those to see if we can refine the Scoursa emerald as well. So, I mean, it's not just necessarily about the habitats, and there are important habitats, but it can be for a particular rare species like the Scoursa emerald that we're actively searching for it too within those areas. So it's a combination of encouraging people to go to those areas, i.e. the paid field workers or people that live locally, if they're aware of the sites and perhaps aware of the species, they could probably go along and hopefully pass in their sightings to us as well. This is a nice one here. This is golden ring. This is one of these things that we just don't really understand. It appears every 10 years or so. People are finding the odd, and I mean the very odd specimen by accident or out for a walk or something. So we did try to go and find it in terms of actively sending a team of people in there, but no joy. And then we're looking at breeding, but again, it's very, very difficult. I mean, really, really difficult. But I mean, that's the only two squares, as you see there on the left-hand side, for Ireland, and that hasn't changed. There's been sightings from Rathlin, because one of the guys that lives on Rathlin was saying to me that he spent some time in Scotland. It's a common species in Scotland. I mean, it's on the west coast of Scotland, and I mean, there's no reason why we wouldn't get it in Rathlin, but we haven't been able to confirm it either with a photograph or an active specimen. So we can't take somebody saying, well, I know because I've seen it before. I'm sorry, but that'll not work. I mean, we need sort of that detail, because I mean, look at the extremes there. I mean, it has to be concrete evidence for this species, or indeed any other species, that it is actually present there before we would accept the record. So, I mean, some of the nice things we want to do is we're hoping to do a paper summarising knowledge on vagrant species. Obviously, climate change is very topical, and the British Dragonfly Society, try and do some of the work they've done. And obviously there is already a red list for dragonflies in Ireland. But I mean, one of the outputs, the right word, outputs from this project will be an update to the red list. Training is a major element of the project as well. There's a snapshot of a group that attended one of our courses, and indeed there are several courses over the island of Ireland. That's just an example of some. I personally ran a few up in for Brackabog with Robert Thompson. So I mean, there is a spread of courses, and we'll run a few more this year. But I mean, it's important because I mean, we've always been running training courses, but I mean, it's the element of mentoring that comes off the back of them that people need help with what they're doing. And I mean, it's nice to have these online systems and cameras, and everybody's got a camera on their phone now. Obviously, you can take a photograph and send it in to us, and we can take it from there. But the training, particularly for people that are interested, is very important. But then you get follow-up training where people are coming back again, the seasonality coming into it, the different sets of species in the start and the end of the year, etc., etc. So it has been a major component of the project. Obviously, you need to give people something, and these are some of the very nice, simple things that we've constructed to give away, and the various levels of the scheme and whatnot. And there's this nice color poster that people can get through Waterford as well. We also do like recording around particular weeks or particular events. This is the Heritage Week and obviously Biodiversity Week, and we would, particularly Waterford, would do a lot of sort of advertisement, if you like, around those 2 weeks to encourage people to record dragonflies amongst other things. So you can see that the commoner species are making up a bigger percentage there, particularly in the Biodiversity Week. You've got the large red. So I mean, those are nice things to do that just keep the sort of turnover of sort of general events that you can get involved with when it comes to dragonflies. Likewise, breakdown of the number of recorders and the percentage of records. I mean, I often say now that if you had 100 people interested in recording dragonflies, what you'll probably find is that it may only be 5 or 10% of those people that keep coming back and keep giving you records. So you see a very high percentage there of people of that 100, let's say, that are giving you 1 up to 5, maybe even up to 10 records. And after that, you've got a big tail off, which is absolutely normal for any citizen science project. So what I say is it's that 5 or 10% that you actually target your resources at, and you encourage them to keep coming, keep doing more, keep giving them field work, keep giving them mentoring, keep giving them more detailed training courses. So it's just the inevitability of a lot of these schemes. So I mean, people are out walking about to see someone take a photograph, send it in. That might be the last time you hear from them. But it's not criticism. It's just the way of the beast, in a sense that that's the way a lot of people work. They're interested. They'll help you out, and it's the other 5 or 10% where they keep coming back. Plenty of feedback, etc., etc. So I mean, in terms of the species, it's probably pretty much the same sort of argument. There are a few species where you get lots and lots of record, quite common species, like large red, for example, the common dart, or anybody that's done any sort of recording. The emperor now as well is quite a common one. And then you get a tail off for those really rare species that you may need some specific type of field work. The scarce blue-tailed damselfly over in the right-hand side there is one that we actively target for, if you like, paid field workers, along with the Irish damselfly. Golden ring dragonfly you see there as well. So there are a few towards that right-hand side of that chart where we are actively encouraging and financing, if you like, people to go out and look for those species. And in the course of doing that, obviously they'll come across all these other ones as well. So I mean, it's important that we find out more, particularly about these rare species that are maybe in some of these vulnerable or endangered categories in the red list, and that's why we're targeting those. So I mean, this is an interesting species. This is species we first found back in 2000, that 2000 to 2003 recording project. There were signs that was coming into Ireland, and indeed if you look at the current situation, and in fact, in the last couple of years, this just middle chart is really only up to 2021, but we have records now for the North Coast and maybe even Rathlin up in the Donegal. We were in the Burren there a few years ago for a conference, and it was the emperor was really common on those turloughs, etc. And in fact, in some cases, it looked to be competing with some of the more, let's call them native species, and that's something that has come into my head a few times since, but it's very difficult to know, but it certainly is spreading out across the island of Ireland. And if it is impacting the more typical or common species, we're just not sure yet, but it's certainly something that we can look at. And the other one, if it works, is the migrant hawker again. Definite spreading out. We have quite a few records now. This is not the most recent map, but I mean, it is one of those strange, interesting species that was coming in back in 2000, 2003, and it spread out quite clearly over the next 20 years. So, I mean, but I mean, these are the research type questions that all these projects take you into. And I mean, there ain't no simple. Is it climate change? Who knows? Is it habitat loss? Don't know. I mean, there's some big questions to be asked here, and I mean, perhaps that's something that will come out of it, and we can spend the next few years trying to address some of those as well. In terms of how things are changing, let's say, we've done this sort of graphing of seasonality, let's call it seasonality, over the course of the project, etc. And there may be subtle changes coming through there. It's very hard to tell. There's no real statistic analysis there to say it's definitely shifting, but I mean, taken in isolation, you may think, well, there's something going on there. So again, bigger questions need detailed, specific surveys and the projects. But I say that's beyond the scope currently of this project. So I mean, you then can do all sorts of nice charts and graphs looking at number of records per 10K or the number of species, and we get what we think we're going to get. They're important sites. Southeast Ireland, Killarney, around the Burren there, for example, up into below Lough Neagh, west into West Fermanagh, etc., etc. And then, I mean, are they because there's more recorders in those areas? Are those because they're important sites? There's probably an element of that, and then you do other charts and graphs where you can look at the one on the right. I've tried to very simply look at the number of, for any 10 kilometer squares, I've picked out the number of years, the number of individual years that somebody's been there. So I mean, those are those pinky ones, let's say. I mean, there's a lot of people who have visited those over a lot of years. So I mean, that's why they're coming out. But interestingly, and I mean, it's very early stage yet, what we're actually doing is I've just given this data set to a guy who's running an invertebrate scarcity and rarity analysis, and he's going to pick up on a variety of factors that he'll run through whatever magical box he puts these things into, and it'll kick out a few answers to hopefully cast a bit of light on the story of the recording in terms of, is it built around more recorders in certain areas, or actually there's fewer species there, etc., etc. So I mean, these are the types of things we can do now. We've done similar for the water beetles, and I mean, it's a nice data set to do it for. There's over 66,000 records, which is quite respectable. So it is. It's not the 200,000 of the lichens, but I mean, we'll start off with this one and see what sort of questions or answers it's throwing up.
Damian, apologies. Can I just jump in there?
Yeah.
We're just coming up to 10 to 8 now. So
I'm nearly finished.
Yeah, okay. I'll let you just finish them. No
I mean, this is just another example of the type of stuff that we're doing and the detail of it. These are guys that go out and do survey reports, and this is the type and detail of information we're getting back. This is a project we contributed to for the state of dragonflies, and we give all our records, and all that's available as a PDF downloadable. So it's all there. So I mean, the Irish data set has been used from that. Importantly, the why, the Northern Ireland priority species level, and then this is the recent revision to that list, where we're able to take a lot more information and construct a more detailed appreciation of what dragonflies should be on the Northern Ireland priority species list. And this is our PhD project at Queen's, where we're looking at the Irish damselfly. And what we do is we go to various sites across the island. We've got a particular license that allows us to take a leg off each specimen. We put it into a tube of ethanol. We bring it back to Queen's, and they run their magic. And we've got over 400 samples already for that analysis, and we're working on that as we speak. So it's really to look at the difference. Is the Irish population any different from that in continental Europe? It's a species that you don't find in Britain. So, I mean, one of the nice things as well is I got to that conference there a few years ago, and through that I was able to meet a lot of experts, and through that we got out in nice field work, got to visit sites, and got an appreciation of the fauna across Europe. But more importantly, we got to meet the people that were able to collect the samples in various countries that sent those back to our lab at Queen's, and they're going to process those to see if the population in Ireland is isolated from Europe, or is it part of the population of Europe that just has been brought in as an invasive. We're not sure yet. So very, very quickly, last couple of slides. The nice thing about this group is you get to visit all sorts of lovely habitats. And this is Brackabog in County Armagh. And this is the home of one of the very rarest dragonflies in Ireland. And it's a species that's not, I'd say, not too common. It's only known from 2 or 3 10-kilometer squares. And really, the bigger picture on this is another project I'm involved with, looking at mammals, and hopefully I've met a few people last at that conference, and we're thinking about doing a revision of the European Dragonfly Atlas. So just to finish, the last slide, I've already shown it, but gives you, just to remind you, the sort of things that we've been doing, and it's taken us into the last year of the study, 2024, sorry. So if you're interested in recording dragonflies, give us a shout, and we'll take your interest from there. Okay.